Okay, this is the next to last video in Unit 11. Unit 11 is about graphing and solving quadratic equations. And do you remember what quadratic equations are? They are equations in which the highest exponent is a 2. Okay, so the method we're going to learn now doesn't require factoring. You don't have to remember anything about red motorcycles or GCF or dots or anything like that. It's called the quadratic formula. Just take 3 numbers off of the equation, plug them into the formula, and it gives you the answers. You don't have to worry about factoring. So that's kind of nice. It is a formula, though. It's not a formula you have to memorize. It's printed on the SOL, but you don't have to factor. So let's see how this works. All right, so you should have guided notes D in front of you, and we're going to solve 4 equations by the quadratic formula. The video gets a little long, I'm going to cut into 2 parts. Okay, the first step is to make sure the equation is in this form. And the main thing you need to take out of that form is that you have 0 on one side. Okay, make sure you have 0 on one side. I would also make sure that the number in front of the x squared, called the coefficient, I would also make sure that that number is positive. The b and the c can be negative, but it's really easier if the a is positive. After you get it in this form, identify what a, b, and c are, and then plug it into this formula right here. Now, there is a story about a boy being negative, in other words, having a bad attitude. He's kind of undecided. So he goes in the house, decides to be square. I don't know. There's a story that goes with that. I don't remember where it is. It's silly. I'm sure you can look it up. But it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now, when you write down the formula, I would recommend that you write it like this. All right. You write it everywhere you see a letter, put parentheses instead, and fill in the parentheses when you're ready to solve it. That's what I would recommend, that you write it like this. That's where the B was. That's where the B was. That's where the A is. That's where the C is. That's where the A is. So write it like this. It'll force you to plug things in correctly and not make sign mistakes. All right, let's look at number 1. Number 1 is already in this form. We've already got 0 on one side, so that's done. So let's identify what A, B, and C are. A, B, and C. A is the number in front. That is a 10. B is the number in front. Oops, let me scoot that over. B is the number in front of the X term. That is a 1. And C is the number at the end that doesn't have a variable on it. Notice that I don't have X on the, it's just the numbers in front. Do not include the X's. Now, I think y'all like it better when I write a little bigger. So let's do it on this sheet of paper here. So I've got 10x squared. What was it? Plus x minus 3. Okay, so A is 10, B is 1, it's the number in front, C is negative 3. All right, let's write down that formula. All right, that's what the formula looks like. Now go look at your notes. What number goes here? That's B, so that's going to be negative 1. And right here, B also goes here. That's going to be 1 squared. And then A is 10, and C is negative 3. And right here, A is 10. Now we're just going to use the order of operations. All right, a negative 1, that's negative 1, plus or minus. Now you can type what's underneath into Desmos if you want, if you're not sure about arithmetic. But, I mean, it's not that hard. 1 squared is 1. Now this, look at these 3 are multiplied together. That's a negative 4 plus 10 times negative 3. You've got 2 negatives multiplied. 2 negatives multiplied is going to turn that into a positive. And 4 times 10 times 3, that's 120. But that isn't going to be a positive because you have a minus times a negative, and a minus, when all of these are multiplied together, a minus times a negative is going to turn that into a plus. And the denominator 2 times 10 is 20. Okay? All right, so the next thing we're going to do, put the 1 and the 20 together. That's 121. All right, what is the square root of 121? You should know that that is 11. Now, this plus or minus looks confusing. What does that plus or minus mean? It means that both plus 11 and minus 11 need to be done. So we need to actually separate this into two fractions, negative 1 plus 11 over 20 and negative 1 minus 11 over 20. That's what plus or minus means. You have to do both. All right, what is negative 1 plus 11? That is 10 over 20. What's negative 1 minus 11? That's negative 12 over 20. Finally, you should reduce them both. 10 over 20 is 1/2, and negative 12 over 20, you can reduce that by 4. That's going to be negative 3/5. So those are my two solutions. Now, this looks complicated, but you didn't have to remember steps for factoring. It's just the formula's given to you. You just plug the numbers into the formula and use the order of operations. That's all it is. All right, let's do the second one. Then I'll split the video up into two parts. All right, that's the same answer you would get if you factored. If you factored that using red motorcycle, you'd get the same answer. We didn't have to remember how to factor. We just plugged it into a formula. All right, let's see. The second one on the notes is 2x squared plus x equals 10x plus 5. Now, you notice right away this is in the wrong form. This needs to be 0 in this side. So this needs to move, and the 5 needs to move. Now, when you move the 10x over, that's going to become a negative 10x, and it goes with the positive 1x. The positive 5 moves over. It becomes negative 5. Throat's getting dry. All right, so what is this equation going to look like? It's going to be 2x squared minus 9x minus 5. All right, so now let's identify what A, B, and C are. Well, A is the number in front of the square. B is the number in front of the x. C is the number on the end that's by itself. Okay, let's write down the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is negative b, that's where the b is going to go, plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now I'll just plug everything in. Right here, that's going to be a negative 9. Now be careful, this negative was in the formula. That negative belongs to the 9, and that's a double negative. That's going to turn to a plus. Now this negative 9 goes inside the parentheses, and this is going to be A, and this is going to be C all over 2A. All right, let's use the order of operations. That becomes a positive 9. Okay, that's a positive 9. Now, if you don't know what negative 9 squared is, and you have to use the calculator, make sure you put the negative 9 in parentheses when you square it. If you don't, you're going to make a sign mistake. Negative 9 squared is positive 81. And once again, we got a minus times a negative, so that's going to become a plus. 4 times 2 times 5, that's 8 times, that's 40. Oh, that's going to be 121 again. It's the same number we saw last time. 2 times 2 is 4. All right. That's going to be 9 plus or minus the square root of 121 over 4. We just did one like that. We know the square root of 121 is, it's 11. All right, so I've got to break this up into 2. 9 plus 11 over 4 and 9 minus 11 over 4. What's 9 plus 11? That's 20. What's 9 minus 11? That's negative 2. And we need to reduce them both. 20 over 4, that reduces to 5. Negative 2 over 4, that reduces to negative 1/2. And those are my two solutions. That's the same solutions I would have gotten if I'd have gone through and done red motorcycle. That looks complicated, but it's the same formula every time. You don't have to remember to factor. All right, this is a good place to stop. We'll stop here, and we'll do the last two examples in the next video.